Capitalism. It's evil, right? It's greedy, right? Capitalists are people who just want to exploit their employees and make tons of money while the employees can barely live. Or is it? In this next clip, Dinesh D'Souza, one of my favorite commentators, breaks it down in a really easy way to understand. Let's get into it.
Here in Palo Alto, there's a Ritz-Carlton, there's a Westin. Now imagine a guy who is a valet parking cars at the Ritz-Carlton here in Palo Alto.
Okay.
And this guy is paid, let's say, $15 an hour. And let's say that he works 10 hours a day, so he makes $150. And this guy is now thinking to myself, in those 10 hours, how many cars did I park? Well, I parked, let's say, 100 cars.
Okay.
And how much does the Ritz-Carlton charge for someone to park their car? $30. So how much should the Ritz-Carlton make as a result of me parking those 100 cars? $3,000.
You can already see where this is going.
And how much was I paid out of that $3,000? $150. 3,000 minus 150 gives $2,850. Who gets that? So from the valet's point of view, this is a very unjust system because I'm doing the work and some other guy is taking the cash. And this argument about the injustice of capitalism is actually anchored in, I think, a rather interesting argument that was made by Marx himself. And so there's a big difference between the revenue generated by the sales and the cost.
Profit.
And that difference Marx calls surplus value. We call it profit. And Marx's question, quite a profound question, who gets that?
Marx had a very oversimplified view of that wasn't rooted in real world business and had no clue what he was talking about, but I'm sure Dinesh is going to show us that.
Now, Marx's assumption is that that belongs 100% to labor. Why? Because labor made the goods. The capitalists supplied nothing more than the money, which has already been recompensed through interest.
False.
My view is that this description, convincing as it is on first glance, is a completely false representation of how businesses actually run.
Thank you.
Consider for a moment the capitalist. In America today, the vast majority of capitalists supply a lot of things, but the one thing they do not supply is capital.
It's usually a bank or a group of investors or something like that.
Did Steve Jobs actually put up all the capital for Apple? No, he went to a bank. The bank supplied the capital. And this is true of Gates and everyone down the list. The bottom line of it, the capitalist supplies three things that Marx completely ignores, that are actually of far greater value than capital and actually entitle the capitalist to a share of the profit. But Marx, in a sense, submerges these three factors completely.
I'm going to see if I can guess. I can come up with two. Basically, everything that goes into creating the business and then taking on all the risk of the business performing. Let's see what Dinesh says.
First, the capitalist has the idea for the business. Without the idea, there's no business.
Okay.
Labor doesn't think of the idea, the capitalist does. It's his or her idea. They do it. Second, the capitalist organizes the business.
Yep.
Here you have this valet, he goes, I park the cars, I need all the money. The truth of it is the reason you're getting $30 to park a car is you're at the Ritz-Carlton. Somebody built the Ritz-Carlton, somebody thought of it, somebody paid all the capital costs, somebody took out the insurance. You didn't think of that. If you come to my house and want to park my car, I'll pay you 50 cents. So the reason that you're getting $30 is not because of you. It's not your labor that's worth $30. It's the resort that's worth $30. And you didn't create that.
What's the third?
So the capitalist has the idea for it, he organizes it, and third, he takes all the risk.
Yep.
Very important factor. The capitalist gets paid at the end. If the business has a bad quarter, Steve Jobs can't go, or the current Tim Cook can't go to Apple and say, sorry guys, I'm not going to pay you for 6 months. It's looking bad for us this half of the year. No, he has to pay them anyway. So labor is trading a fixed wage for security. But the entrepreneur is taking the risk that he might get nothing out of it, and he could even lose money.
And often
So the truth of the matter is that in fairly assessing the just rewards of capitalism, you have to match what the entrepreneur actually contributes. And to say it's just capital, it seems to me, is a gross misunderstanding how business is actually conducted in the United States and all around the world.
And that is correct, guys. So I have a pretty unique perspective on this because I went through my own evolution personally. I went to a university for a PhD program that was extremely liberal, UC Berkeley. So I was surrounded by this anti-capitalist rhetoric, which was pretty ironic since we're right there at Silicon Valley, and some of the biggest, most successful capitalists in modern history have come out of that area. I digress. What I found once I got into the real world after school and then found myself starting my own business, I ended up starting and selling a company eventually. It grew to about 100 employees. And that drastically changed my perspective on that. Surprisingly, the people in the ivory tower who are just talking theoretically and have no clue how to actually operate in the real world were not right. And Dinesh does a great job here at showing us that. So I'll give you an example from a conversation that I had with one of my managers. I was in the hospitality sector. We had a location that was doing, let's say for easy numbers, $2 million in revenue per year, pretty close to the actual number. And I was going over end of year numbers with her. I was paying her, I think, 60 to 70 grand as her salary to be the general manager of that location. So at face value, she goes, "Oh my God, you're making $2 million off this location and you're only paying me 70K? I understand why you might have that knee-jerk reaction at first, but what I did then was break everything down for her. We were in the second year of operation with this particular location. It cost me $800,000 to actually build the place. I had to pay for marketing. I had to pay for all of the goods. So all the food, all the alcohol, everything that we actually sold, I had to put the money up front for. I had to cover utilities. I had to cover all the things that go into operating that business. I had to handle any maintenance that occurred. And we operated at about an 18% margin. So I showed her at the end of the day, and then from that margin, you take money to set aside for any future capital expenditures, any issues that may come up, any decreases in business volume, as hospitality can often be seasonal. I had to pay all the bands, any special events we had, all of that stuff I had to cover to create the environment in which she could employ her skill set to make her, by the way, guaranteed 70 grand a year plus benefits, right? Me as the entrepreneur, as the business owner, I had no guarantees, and I had to put up a massive amount of effort, risk, and capital to create that environment where she could then go and make money and sustain her life. Once I showed her at the end of the day, I didn't pay myself for years when I started the business. And then when I finally did, I actually took a salary from multiple locations, mind you, that was less than the salary I was paying the general manager of one location. And that really opened her eyes up to what actually goes into running a business and how drastic the difference is from this pseudo-intellectual perspective of the laborers are getting screwed over by the capitalists, which, look, there are situations where this happens. I would say oftentimes not in America, but in places where American companies benefit from that uneven relationship between capital and labor, like Africa, like China. They don't want to talk about that because that goes into making their iPhones and their Teslas and all their fun little gadgets that they use to have this amazing quality of life. You know, there's the example of tweeting out about anti-capitalism using your iPhone while you're sitting in a Starbucks, right? All of this stuff is extremely hypocritical because capitalism put you in that position of privilege to be able to complain about capitalism. So anyway, I think Dinesh does a great job here at breaking this down. My perspective has been that most people just don't understand what goes into starting and running a business, and all they can see is, rightfully so, things from their perspective. But I think us as entrepreneurs and business owners need to be transparent and explain, look, here's how it all breaks down. And actually, I'm not making any money right now. I'm hoping to make money later when maybe I sell the business or I get to a point where we're extremely cash flow positive and I can take a distribution. But I'm taking years of risk here and putting up tons of capital. Meanwhile, you're living your life, no risk, making a nice paycheck. Let me know what you think. Love you guys. keep your minds free.